I'm trying to be great, and I'm on my way. Way up, way up, way up. It's never too late, and I'm on my way.
I'ma leave my mark. Ready, set, go. Ready, set, go. Ready, set.
With so much negativity being yielded at the youth of our nation, it seems hard to find any signs of a bright future. Coming from a legendary past, the new generation of Bahamians seek to take this nation to heights it's never seen. That's where the youth perspective comes in. We seek to display tomorrow's leaders in every facet of society. Each show will focus on today's pace-setters, trendsetters, movers and shakers, and the next generation of great, impactful Bahamians. We seek to uplift, motivate, and encourage our listeners. Tune in as we address issues of importance with wisdom and intelligence, all from the youth perspective.
It must have been 3 a.m. when the text came in. It's some of my fix. My stomach bending, my thumb was trembling, no pun intended, but I wanted to die when I saw it was him and it read KB. This time is real, homie, I can't live. It was in all caps, but I knew he had no caps on his guns or his pills, so I ripped out the door. All the covers down on the floor, no shoes, I just walk on my tears, calling them over and over and over again while I'm throwing the car in again. Could he be so selfish? Well, this heaven failed him. Where I want the answer. Jason. Hello?
Suicide. Got one in the chamber that's waiting to take you right out tonight. Don't roll the dice. It's all on the table, it's all for the taking, but what's the odds?
Yeah, I parked in the street, left the car with the key, should I call the police? What if he turns it on me? Then I looked up, is that him? Oh, for the sake, I can't think. My tongue is as heavy as my heart, I can't speak. Every time I blink, I'm a step closer, my heart about to burst as I close up on the front door and get the doorbell to ring. It was unlocked, so I ran to the top staircase. As I stared, got a case on the floor. Jason, open up, continue to knock. Jason, open up, you ain't gotta do this. What about the kids? Don't go Judas, you got reason to live. We can get through this, don't give in. And I heard movement in a voice I'll never forget. He said, stop it, I'm about to cock it. You better call back when I was in Iraq. Just leave home, boy, I got this. You know the truth is, I had to shoot kids. I'm so guilty, and God might let it go, but I'll never forgive me. Oh, why not? The army never trained me to care. You don't know the horror of living in a war zone and then coming back to civilian affairs. I made my bed, the table's been set. My wife moved out, I don't see my kids. Everything that gave me meaning is gone. The grief's deep-seated and bleeds to the bone. I want out.
Suicide. Got one in the chamber that's waiting to take you right out tonight. Don't roll the dice. It's all on the table, it's all for the taking, but what's the odds?
No, I ain't have a word. Not a story, not a verse. It was silence. I'm trying not to make this worse. My brain, I googled and searched. Nothing from school that would work or the group or the church. So what do I do? Just fell to my knees and I started to blur. I don't understand this, but you've been looking to the weed in them dances. Don't be crying by the J. Nobody in the West got the answers. Let's get established, your life isn't yours to demand it. You can't do what you please. Jason, I love you, but the next step is God, homie. You ain't escaping the thing. You know Jesus, he wanted to die in that garden. Acquainted the man at the sorrows, but he kept up the fight. Cause he knew joy was coming tomorrow. You have to squeeze that revolver. Cause you know that there's hope at the end of the tunnel. Embrace it, no matter how faintly. God is not silent, please hear what he's saying. Jason!
911, what's your
Yes,
emergency?
I got a friend, he's locked himself in the bathroom and I just heard a gun go off. I don't know.
Okay, calm down, sir. Are you able to get inside the room?
Yeah, he's got me locked out.
Okay, can you try to get inside the room?
Hold on, I'm gonna try to...
Sir?
Hope is calling you, I see you, I hear you.
Sir, I'm gonna need you to calm down.
Hope is calling you. Hope is calling you. Hope is calling you.
And we're back. It's all about the youth perspective, and yours truly, Kashigan Jamal Adderley, is with you. And of course, it's another great Saturday evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget, you can catch the show on SoundCloud. Type in Kashigan J Adderley or the Youth Perspective. And of course, if you got an Apple device, you can go into iTunes and you can download the podcast. Just look up the Youth Perspective or Kashigan J Adderley, all right? And you'll be updated on every brand new show that we bring out, all right? So this show is a new show. We're in a great season, and we've had some remarkable persons come through. And this is an interesting show, so I definitely want you to sit back, relax, enjoy the show. We're going to have a great topic as we talk about World Suicide Prevention Day. All right. And this is a show I've been wanting to do for a very long time because suicide is something that's prevalent, not just in the Bahamas, but around the world, particularly with our young persons. And it's something that we don't hear about too often, but it happens from time to time. And it has been something that we haven't really talked about much. So I invited none other than Dr. King to join us on the Youth Perspective to talk a little bit more about it. So how you doing, Dr. King?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. It's so great to have you here on the Youth Perspective. And before we go into our topic of the day, just tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background.
Well, my full name is Dr. Tracy King. I have an undergraduate degree in biology and psychology and a doctoral degree in clinical psychology. I am currently employed at Sandlands Rehabilitation Center, where I'm a clinical psychologist there.
Okay, awesome. So you've been in the field for quite some time.
A little over 10 years.
A little over 10 years, okay. Yeah, and you are definitely well-versed in this topic. So I guess the first question would be, what is suicide?
Well, in its simplest terms, suicide is the intent to end one's life. So the person has come to the decision that their life is no longer worth living, and they make intentional efforts to end it.
Okay, and is this something that's very prevalent in the Bahamas? Do you see this a lot?
Well, locally, we don't know the actual numbers. We do know that there are some statistics that indicate that there is an increase over the years in persons with suicidal intent. We know that worldwide it has become a major problem. The World Health Organization noted that about over 800,000 persons a year die by suicide. And just to kind of put it in perspective, that's like 1 in every 40 seconds.
Wow.
And if efforts aren't made to really impact the amount of suicides happening, they say by 2020 that will increase to 1 every 20 seconds. So we know that locally it's becoming a major issue, and is a major issue actually, even though we don't have the numbers. We know that in the hospital where I work at Sandlands Rehabilitation Center, we're seeing an increase of persons coming in with suicidal thoughts and even suicidal attempts. And worldwide, you see the numbers that is just staggering. Just to kind of, it kind of puts you on that like, didn't even realize that it was such a big issue. We see it more in the media where you have some stars, being reported that they attempted and even committed suicide. And even within our local newspapers, we've seen through the year, through this year alone, about maybe 2 to 3 even alleged suicides reported.
Yeah, and then that's why I really wanted to get you on, because we're seeing this thing happen, and I guess some persons can't fathom the thought of committing suicide. But why? Why would someone want to commit suicide?
Well, I will say suicide in itself is a complex decision. There are many different factors that will bring a person to end their life. But we know that overall, a person who is suicidal gets to the point of feeling very trapped in their situation and feeling very hopeless about their situation. It could be whether financial, it could be maybe a chronic illness, but those decisions and those factors vary from person to person and can be very complex.
Is it just something that happens with adults, or does it happen with young people? Like, who is susceptible to suicide?
Well, I always say that suicide does not discriminate. Suicide can happen across the age range, from children to young adults to even older adults. We know that there are statistics out there that put suicide within those age ranges to be in the top 10, so to speak. Depending on which age range, it could be from 3rd to 5th to even 8th. But we are trying to target everyone across the board because it's susceptible. Everyone's susceptible. So your coworker, your friend, your spouse, someone who you never would think would consider suicide may be susceptible. And that's why it's important to really recognize what are the warning signs of suicidal person so that you can hopefully help save a life.
Okay, indeed. Now, for parents listening in, they're watching the children, and is there any signs that they be looking out for, or you see your coworker, what should you be looking for if suicide is something that you're looking for?
Well, warning signs will be like verbal signs. For example, I want to end my life. I'm a burden to others. I feel extremely trapped. I have no reason to live, so forth. Sometimes, it may come out in a joke. People say that there is some truth behind jokes. I always say that you might not want to jump down a person's throat when they say, I want to kill myself. Like, I've had a hard day. I just want to, kill myself. I say, just, pay closer attention.
Right.
There are also some emotional signs where the person may be saying, I'm hopeless, I'm helpless, feelings of sadness, maybe sometimes overwhelming guilt or anger or frustration. There's also the behavioral signs where a person will become more reckless or impulsive. You might notice that they have increased substance use. Sometimes people will increase their substance use to lead to an overdose, so to speak. There's also the preparation for the death, such as preparing their will or giving away prized possessions. You'll also notice that someone who is suicidal, withdrawing from family or friends. So these are just some warning signs. I will say to make sure that you don't just take one warning sign to indicate that this person is suicidal, but the more warning signs the person is exhibiting, the higher the risk that they are suicidal.
And I think the thing about it is that is not to be casual, I guess, about the persons that you come into contact with, not even your children. When you see certain things and learn person's characteristics, so you could kind of know, like, hold on, something has changed.
Yeah.
It's not the same, and you could kind of pick it up. And what should you do? Like, is this something that you call the police, or like, what do you do if they are sounding like, they are thinking about it?
Well, depending on the severity of the situation, sometimes you might just notice a coworker, looking down or isn't as pepped as they usually were, or not dressing like they usually, like you notice some signs, some significant changes. You can just pull them aside and say, hey, I noticed this, and this. Are you okay? Is everything okay? Some people say if you ask if a person is suicidal, they're just going to put the idea in their head. That in itself is a myth, because by asking someone who is suicidal if they are, is allowing them to say, hey, here's an opportunity to share what you're going through. Maybe I can help. And it also gives you the opportunity to maybe make a change within that person's life, because someone who is suicidal feels hopeless. So by having that conversation and asking that question, you can actually help them see maybe some hope in their situation. And what can you do is to ask that question, but to also allow yourself to listen to them in a non-judgmental manner. Because sometimes, when someone say, I want to kill myself, the other person jumps down their throat and say, why you want to kill yourself? You know, what's going on with you? If you do that, this is what's going to happen. And so you start with all these judgments and so forth. And I always say a person who is suicidal already have judged themselves, have already kind of put themselves through the ringer. So to come at with them with judgment and so forth isn't going to help them. It's only going to hurt them and make the situation probably worse. So I suggest listening to them with a non-judgmental air. But to encourage them to get help. If it's a crisis situation, I would say, maybe get rid of all the means of access, lethal means of access,
Right.
To call 919. If the person is willing to go with you, to take them to accident emergency so that they can get that immediate help.
And what about counseling? Seeing a professional in that area, does that help as well?
That does help. That's where the encouragement to get the help from.
Okay.
Where if it's a severe kind of situation, you definitely want to use the emergency services like 919 and going to the accident emergency. If it's not a severe situation, you still want to encourage them to get the treatment. There are public related services that the person can go to. Sandlands has a outpatient branch called Community Counseling Assessment Center. It's on Collins Avenue, and there are other avenues in the private sector that you can go to if you don't want to do the public sector.
Right.
But getting the treatment is essential, and that treatment could involve whether medication or even talk therapy.
Okay, and the thing that I notice, particularly with suicide, is that in Hollywood, over the past few years, we've been noticing that a lot of celebrities, have went that route. I think about Robin Williams. I think about Lee Jackson. The famous Jet Jackson. I don't know if you watched that as a kid.
Recently, the Lincoln Park guy.
Lincoln Park, right,
Yeah.
right, and he committed suicide. And I think people would always think that, hey, these people have all the money, they have all the access and all that stuff. But it's like you said earlier, that it's really a personal situation, and you don't ever know what the person is going through on the inside.
No.
That they may look good on the outside and may be smiling and laughing, but that may just be hiding what's going on internally.
Yeah, I think, our situation here, the fact that we're not, how should I say, open to dealing with mental health or talking about mental health, it's clouded it's clouded in stigma. And so we don't allow persons who are ill to really get that treatment. They feel isolated. They feel like if they go get that help, if they share that they are struggling, that they're going to be treated differently. And unfortunately, that's just where we are right now when it comes to that. And I always talk about stigma because it is a huge barrier for persons, persons that have been diagnosed with mental illness and persons that actually want to get help. You have persons that may be aware that they're going through some things and they want to go and get the help. But in order to get that help, they need to talk to their manager or they need to talk to someone and so forth. And so when they do that, then word gets out and then their coworkers and friends and family members start to treat them differently. And it's not just in how we treat other people, but also it's in our policies and how we go about just our everyday. It's been a push to kind of normalize mental illness with physical illness, because we always have conversations with strangers talking about my pressure high and all the rest of the stuff, but it's difficult for someone to acknowledge and even have a conversation about being depressed. Or having to go through an anxiety kind of situation, and I'm hoping that if we continue to have these conversations, that it will just be as common as having a conversation about a physical ailment, because in essence, a mental illness is an illness, is a medical condition. It affects the way a person's think, the way that they feel, and the way that they act, just like sometimes a physical ailment does.
And is something that you said, depression. Is depression like the leading factor into suicide? Is that like where it goes to?
Persons who are depressed may more likely have suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts and desires. We know that there is a high relationship between mental illness and suicide. So a person with a mental illness will be at a higher risk of suicidal intent. There are other factors that put a person at a higher risk. For example, a loss, whether a loss of a relationship, loss of a spouse, a family member, a job, any type of loss can put a person at a higher risk. Also substance use, trauma, being diagnosed with a chronic illness, for example, are all all risks that put a person at a higher level of suicidal intent or possibility.
Right. And before we wrap up, and we still have a few more things that we need to talk to before we get to the end of this interview, because persons need to know where can they call, who can they talk to get help. But I wanted to share my story. Just a few years ago, I think when I was early 20s in COB, now the UB, I dealt with serious depression. And I think I was one of those persons that just dealt with, I didn't feel loved. And I didn't feel like the world would have been better, if I wasn't here.
Yeah.
And so I had suicidal thoughts. I did not do the action, but I did think about it for a very long time. And I was really in a dark place, in a dark pit. But I had help. I had my girlfriend then, who is now my wife, and she really helped me through that. And then, of course, my faith was something that helped me get through that season. But I think sometimes there's so many things that can trigger it off, that persons really just have to do their best to reach out and tell somebody what's going on. because if they don't, you could just be you could just be silently dying, just silently every day, it's just eating away at you until one day you just snap, and then, that's just it. So I just wanted to share that out there for persons listening in. But for persons who are dealing with a family member, who's dealing with somebody who is going through this, what is your encouragement to them?
If you have a family member or someone that is suicidal, I will say my advice is to reach out to them. This past year on September 10th, every year is World Suicide Prevention Day.
Right.
And that was started in 2003 by the International Association of Suicide Prevention and the World Health Organization to highlight the seriousness of suicide and to really bring awareness that it can be prevented. And so the theme this year was take a minute, change a life.
Wow.
So if you know someone who may be considering suicide, to take that minute, because that minute can change that person's life.
Right.
To have that conversation, to ask that question, hey, are you doing okay? To check in with them, to encourage them that, life may be difficult for them right now, but there is a way out. There is that light at the end of the tunnel, to keep on moving forward, to really encourage that step of hope. There are avenues that the person can go. There is the Community Counseling and Assessment Center. There is also a national hotline that the person can call, and that is manned by the Ministry of Social Services. And the number there is 322-2763 or 422-2763. So you can call those numbers. If you would like to speak to someone, that line is available 24/7. There is also other avenues that the person can go and get help. Like I mentioned, that there are those private persons out there, but you can also call Sandlands Rehabilitation Center, and they can help direct a person for getting resources and so forth, because we have tons of informational handouts and so forth. We also like to ask persons to invite us to come and speak in their organizations, whether it's a workplace or whether it's a church, because getting that information out there and having the conversation will hopefully decrease that stigma, increase the knowledge, but also encourage a more safe environment for persons who are struggling with mental illnesses to feel free that they're able to share and feel supported.
Now, and I think too, to add to that, is that persons will never know how important it is to give a hug. How important it is to give a kind word, because, a sharp word or a negative word or, a quick retort could be, something that really sets a spiral, in somebody's life. So we have to be careful in how we interact with those around us. But before, Doc, we wrap up things, and before we wrap up this episode, is there any closing comments, anything that we forgot to mention, anything that you want to add?
I just want to close with just saying that suicide does not discriminate. To make sure that you do your part, because together we have to work together to decrease suicide. So learning the signs, taking that minute can also make a difference.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. King, for sharing with us on this episode of The Youth Perspective. A more serious youth perspective than we normally do, but it's a topic that needs to be talked about, and we will have you on again so we could talk a little bit more about this. We could go a little bit in depth. And of course, if you are dealing with it, or maybe just serious depression or whatever it may be, reach out, contact somebody, get the help that is needed. And there are so many portals, there are so many assets that are available to you. Please use them, because one life is just too much. We can't stand to lose another life. So thank you so much, Dr. King, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, you're listening in to The Youth Perspective. We'll be back with much more.
Just fight a little longer, my friend. It's all worth it in the end. But when you got nobody to turn to, just hold on and I'll find you. I'll find you. I'll find you. Just hold on and I'll find you.
I'm hanging on by a thread, and all I'm clinging to is prayers. And every breath is like a battle. I feel like I ain't come prepared. And death's knocking on the front door. Pain's creeping through the back. Fears crawling through the windows, waiting for them to attack. They say don't get bitter, get better. I'm working on switching them letters. But tell God I'ma need a whole lot of hope keeping it together. I'm smiling in everyone's face. I'm crying whenever they leave the room. They don't know the battle I face. They don't understand what I'm going through. The world trying to play with my soul. I'm just trying to find where to go. I'm trying to remember the way. I'm trying to get back to my home. But I can't do this on my own. That's why I'm just trusting in you. Cause I don't know where else to go. And I don't know what else to do.
Just fight a little longer, my friend. It's all worth it in the end. But when you got nobody to turn to, just hold on and I'll find you. Just fight a little longer, my friend. It's all worth it in the end. But when you got nobody to turn to, just hold on and I'll find you. I'll find you. I'll find you. Just hold on and I'll find you. I'll find you. I'll find you. Just hold on and I'll find you.
They say fear haunts you and pain hates. I say pain strengthens and fear drives faith. And I don't know all of the outcomes, don't know what happens tomorrow. But when that ocean of doubt comes, don't let me drown in my sorrow. And don't let me stay at the bottom. I feel like this hole is too deep to climb. I've been looking for a way out, but I settle for a peace of mind. Picking up the pieces of my life and hoping that I put together something right. Tell me all I got is all I need. Tell me you gon' help me stay and fight. The world tryna play with my soul. I'm just tryna find where to go. I'm tryna remember the way. I'm tryna get back to my home. But I can't do this on my own. That's why I'm just trusting in you. Cause I don't know where else to go. And I don't know what else to do.
No, don't let the fear make you feel like you can't fight this on your own. You know I'll be there for you no matter where you go. You'll never be alone. No, just fight a little longer, my friend. It's all worth it in the end. But when you got nobody to turn to, just hold on and I'll find you. Just fight a little longer, my friend. It's all worth it in the end. But when you got nobody to turn to, just hold on and I'll find you. Just fight a little longer, my friend. It's all worth it in the end. But when you got nobody to turn to, just hold on and I'll find you. I'll find you. I'll find you. Just hold on and I'll find you. I'll find you. I'll find you. Just hold on and I'll find you.
I'm tryna be great, and I'm on my way. Way up, way up, way up. It's never too late, and I'm on my way.
I'ma leave my mark. Ready, set, go. Ready, set, go. Ready, set,
I hope you enjoyed another edition of The Youth Perspective. Stay tuned for more interviews, more in-depth conversation, great music as we seek to encourage, empower, impact, and uplift our youth of this nation. Here on The Youth Perspective, we'll see you next time right here on The Youth Perspective with Keshik and Jamal.